Hi, I'm Robyn Rocket, and you're listening to the Robyn Rocket Zoom Zoom podcast. This podcast is edited versions of the interviews that I did for my show on Resonance FM. It's called Robyn Rocket Zoom Zoom. You can still listen to them. You can go to www.robynrocket.com/zoom zoom. I spoke to lots of different guests and I wanted to share them on podcast platforms like Spotify and that kind of thing. So I've edited the interviews into 15-minute chunks, and in this episode, this is part 1 with Alabaster DePlume, aka Gus Fairbairn. And if you enjoy this, you can listen to the second part wherever you get your podcasts from. Thanks so much to Gus for being my interviewee, and thank you to Paul Dutnall for being executive producer, and thanks to you for listening. I hope you enjoy it. Robyn Rocket Zoom Zoom. I know, Gus, you grew up in Manchester. Was your family very musical?
Not really. But my mum used to play the piano. She does play the piano. When my dad and my mum were first getting close, like in the 70s, when my dad, he was a scientist. Yeah, well, he was a science teacher. And he imagined that because she plays piano, she'd obviously would enjoy a guitar, so he bought her a guitar, and that is the guitar that I've got here still. This Kimbara, my dad gave it to my mum, and if you look on this guitar, it's got the name Bob scratched into the head. Bob is my brother's name, but he didn't scratch it there. I did. I scratched it to get him in trouble. It didn't work. Everyone knew that it was me, but here I am years later playing this acoustic guitar that's got my brother Bob's name scratched into it.
And as you were growing up, did your family listen to a lot of music, like in the house, in the car? What kind of things were you hearing?
Yeah, both of those. Pink Floyd and Leonard Cohen, Queen, Massive Attack, Daniel Billionshere, plenty other things I just can't remember right now.
You mentioned the guitar that your dad bought for your mum. What other instruments were there?
There was an electric guitar that was left to us from this massive pub called the Woodthorpe. When the landlords moved out of that pub, they gave us some of the things that were in their pub when they moved out of it. One of them was a big air rifle. One of them was a Morning Star, which is a mace kind of weapon. One of them was an electric guitar. My dad, he wanted to fix it. It was a bit broken. He fixed it, and we tried to play a song by The Shadows. I started primary school late. I started in the second year primary school. And one of the first things I probably did was to be in the talent show. The sort of, they get the kids to try and do stuff. And I played that.
So as well as playing the guitar in the school talent show, were you doing other kinds of music making?
Yeah, I was prancing around, listening to Guns N' Roses very loud with my brother Joe. He would hit the chair with some sticks to play the drums, and I would jump around doing the singing.
Were you into music at school?
I didn't take music. I didn't consider it to be music. But I would be secretly writing lyrics in the other lessons, I'd be going in the back of my book writing lyrics for songs.
Can you tell me about the first gigs you went to?
I went to see Metallica. I must have been 14. And then after that you kind of see other things. Foo Fighters or stuff like that, and then it gradually gets closer to where you are. You go to the Roadhouse in Manchester, it's like 200 capacity or something like that, and you see some people who you've met playing, and you start to go, I could do this.
And anyone who's aware of your work probably knows that poetry is important. How did you get into that?
I started reading things like beat stuff. Maybe that's the first, when you would say it's poetry as opposed to like lyrics or whatever. But then there's Captain Beefheart, it's probably Captain Beefheart. But yeah, it got me into that kind of beat stuff. I loved Ginsberg and his Howl and so on.
And what kind of music were you listening to when you were a teenager?
What was I listening to? Corrosion of Conformity. It was supposedly kind of political. Oh, Tool. I was well into Tool. And I was, with all the polyrhythms and the strange time signatures. And I got well into that. I got well into making things like that no one can dance to, That is really jagged and it changes a lot. Like Mr. Bungle, Fantomas, and Melt Banana. I love those things. so detailed and so much work has gone into it. And that's what I used to make, you know, really precision, recital stuff that changes often. And I'd be like, some people just make one bit of music loop around and around and that's enough for their song. I'm going to write as many songs as they put in an album into one song, and every few seconds it changes, you know? I do much more work than everyone else, you know? That kind of vibe. Of course now I do something completely different. I do like live development stuff. I make simple things, still in strange time signature usually, but simple things that will repeat throughout the whole tune that people can take and develop with their own feelings, non-recital, according to how they want to play it in that moment.
Could you tell me a bit about the first band you were in and like the first gigs you played?
I wasn't meant to be the singer. I was going to be just the electric guitar guy. A couple of weeks before the first ever gig, the singer pulled out. He threw a big tantrum and said, I'm not playing, expecting us all to not play. But I just said like, oh, it's okay, we'll play my tunes and we'll do the gig. Thus, I became the singer. I wanted the stuff to be good, even if you were just reading it. I think I was kind of taking the out of some people's lyrics at the time. And just, you know, if you just read them out as words, it sounds ridiculous what's being said, you know? You are literally saying blah, 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 something, 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 you know? And it just doesn't, you know, it sounds so silly. I didn't want to be vulnerable to that scrutiny myself, since I was scrutinizing others, maybe, you know? And so I wanted it to be dead good, even if you were just reading it out, which is kind of like trying to make a poem. But then I found that no one could hear what I was saying because the music was so loud and frenetic and furious. And I would take out instruments. I would take out like the guitar for the verse, but then they still couldn't hear. And then I would take out the bass for the verse, and I just eventually just started just taking out everything, you know, and just doing it by itself.
When you left school, did you know that you were going to become an artist?
When I left school, well, I knew that I was an artist. Now and then I would try and think that I could do something related to arts, but I knew, if I was really honest, I just knew that I can't do anything else. I've got to do this.
And were your parents understanding and supportive of your art career?
My dad didn't understand, but he supported it and believed in me. He's like, I don't get it how you can do this. But he put resources into it happening. And he scrutinized what I would say about how it's going to happen. But that is a form of support, scrutinizing. And he had some very good points.
And so how did you go about making yourself a professional artist?
When I left school, I went to college and I did like arts and computers or something, and I fell in with a strange family. And I had this whole 7-year period of life in a strange existence with a strange family that considered itself to be outside of normal. And since it looked down on all other people, considered them as beneath, as less good, I wanted to be a part of it and not to be just like everyone else. It wasn't about connecting with people. It's really interesting. I had to go to that separate life that was about making yourself separate to the society in order to, years later, be doing this work on connecting with more people, as many people as possible.
And what happened after that 7 years?
When that ended, I went to another life with this crew of people, all of them 7 years younger than me, in South Manchester. And we ran a jam night. It was called Frantica. And one of those people, I still know him, actually, but he's in Vietnam, called Rupert. He saved me, really, by bringing me there to that house with all those lovely characters. It was really sweet. It was a really sweet entrance into actual real life, more connecting with society. It was a very foolish, youthful, wonderful, sunshine, lovely just way. One day someone left a clarinet at my house, and so I played it, and I thought, maybe this is nice. And it's at the end of that time that I got a saxophone.
What kind of music were you listening to at that time of your life?
I was listening to like rock and roll, 50s rock and roll, and they would do that honky saxophone sound, which is funny because I don't make that sound. But you know, that thing. I'm like, I want that. I want to do that. What was I listening to then? Let's see. Tom Waits. The Mars Volta. What else? Caps in Beefheart still. All of that Caps in Beefheart. I had been watching the anime Cowboy Bebop, the theme tunes of Cowboy Bebop, and then threw that into like Thelonious Monk. He's great, Thelonious Monk. I love him.
How did that time of your life end?
I think it's because I had a romantic relationship with someone that ended, and because of the way that it had been and the way it ended, I just was like, I've got to get away. I've got to leave all this whole thing.
Where did you go to?
I went into... I got a room in a mill, like an art studio in a mill, and just put all my stuff there and slept there sometimes, but instead of living anywhere in a house or whatever and having like family or friends or whatever, I just travelled. And that's how I connected with Bristol. And I went to Ireland, and I was going around. There's like poetry things you can do. There's events where you can just speak, and I got into performing poetry and writing poetry for performance and learning things that you can do on a stage when you've got no one else there. You've got great freedom, you know.
Well, if you want to know what happened next, you can listen to part 2 of Gus's podcast with me, Robyn Rocket. But for now, thank you very much for listening. Thank you to Gus, aka Alabaster DePlume, for being my guest. Thank you to Paul Dutnall for being executive producer. Thanks to Arts Council England for funding the projects that made the radio shows that made the podcast happen. And thanks to you for listening. Bye!